nice.
And just by doing it on one string,
Yeah.
it's like I'm actually listening to how it sounds. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's super important in any capacity.
Yeah.
And in some ways too, it can be just like getting used to how something sounds. It's just, and listening to yourself as you're playing, or giving yourself time to figure out what something sounds like.
Right.
Like even one thing I'll do sometimes is I'll drone a string, and I'll just I'll take a mode or something, like, you know, so you could take the major scale.
Here's a drone.
Yeah, so we got this E drone going on, and I'll take a major scale, which is, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, like that. And I might just kind of sit around and improvise with that. You know, and then I might take another mode. What's another mode, Gary?
Dorian.
Dorian. Okay, so Dorian's built 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, 1. And I might just like say, okay, well let me check out Dorian. You know. And then I might just say, okay, let me play around an Ionian for a minute, and then let me switch to Dorian.
Yeah. Very nice.
And just by doing it on one string,
Yeah.
it's like I'm actually listening to how it sounds.
Yeah.
And most people, when you talk about modes, all they're thinking about is patterns.
Right.
You aren't thinking about...
Or relative modes, which isn't going to necessarily elucidate the intervals of the actual mode.
Yeah. And like when I learned modes, like nobody was like, hey, this goes over this chord. Or like, hey, check out what it sounds like against the chord, which is the whole point. It's like without a bass note or without a chord, we don't even hear how that sounds. It's just like, oh, okay, it could sound like the major scale, or here's another pattern. So I think a lot of, and I guess when I say like I learn things phonetically, it's kind of like that. It's like I would just kind of be assimilating information, like learning a bunch of scale patterns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't find out a lot of useful approaches for a long time. To really check out how this stuff actually sounded.
Yeah.
And once I was able to kind of do that in a friendly way, like that was pretty friendly. You're just, okay, well, I've got this sound, I've got this sound.
No chord changes, just
just a drone, nothing's moving
drone,
around, no stress, one string, you know? And I could be like, oh, okay, well, like Dorian kind of sounds like this, and Ionian kind of sounds like this, or whatever scale you wanted to do that with.
Yeah.
So I think of that as ear training too.
Right.
Like just putting yourself in a place to where you can listen to what things are actually sound like.
Right.
And that sounds obvious, but it's, it can be kind of confusing, because I think there's also a lot of information these days about, it's got to be pretty overwhelming in some ways to try and learn the instrument now, just because there's like, it feels like you're walking into a Walmart and you're just like, wow, okay, like I have like, man, I just want to buy one tube of toothpaste. And there's just like, here's 9,000 different brands of toothpaste. You're like, I just want to learn this one thing. How do I, how do we like turn the choices down a little bit and get to something like that?
And that shiny new thing syndrome, like, no, not this video, next lesson, next this, next that.
Well, that's useful, but it's got to be, there's got to be more. There's got to be more stuff. The listening thing, I think, like it makes it really personal. There's something unique about being like, oh, okay, like, can I hear that, and can I connect my hands to my brain or my heart, depending on where you're listening from. And yeah, man, that was a really powerful thing. Yeah. And it just, the more I kind of strengthened that muscle, I think the more a lot of other things started to make sense. It made them simpler. I also realized in some cases of frustration, I was trying to play stuff that I couldn't hear. Right. You know, and I think we all kind of fall into that too, as we're trying to like, oh, okay, I want to get better. I want to get better. Yeah. And you're messing with stuff, and I'm just like, man, I really don't even know what this sounds like. Right. And it never really feels like it connects. Right. You know, and so if you can slow it down enough to be like, oh yeah, okay, here's kind of how this sounds, or I like this note going to this note, then it's like you're able to have a little bit more skill. Yeah.
Or could I sing that note that I think I'm trying to target? Right.
That's a big one. Yeah. Most definitely.
Hey everybody, Gary here with Pow Music. I hope you enjoyed that little clip from my full hour-and-a-half interview with Carter Arrington, one of my favorite guitar players and one of the greatest alive today. If you're not familiar and you don't follow him yet, the link is in the description. So I loved what he went over in this little clip. We didn't talk about it, but in my fretLIVE Fretboard Mastery program, this is the first thing we do. In Module 1 of Unit 1 out of 12 units, we explore all the intervals on the open E string to a drone. So it was so cool to hear him talk about this. But in the course, in that Unit 1, that's before we even talk about modes and scales and right and wrong. We're just exploring the sound of each interval. Then from there, we build the major scale. We learn what it means to be in a key. We build chords within the key. Then we learn relative and parallel major and minor before getting into the cage system. Then 7th chords, 9th chords, sus chords, and ending on modes in the last unit of the 12 units. And each step of the way, there's creative assignments and song learning assignments, so you're applying what you're learning and creating with what you're learning. We do that as a live course a few times a year with 40 students. We come together twice a week in Zoom sessions, and we also post in a private group. Or you could do that as a self-paced version. So if you like this method, if you like the fretLIVE, if you like the philosophy here, check that out, link in the description. Also, you could download a worksheet to go with this lesson with all of the 7 modes across that high E string, along with 5 different drones I made. I just put down an E bass line or an E cello drone with different drum grooves, some Latin percussion, some funk, some rock, different tempos. So the direct link to those resources on my Patreon page is in the description. And by becoming a patron, you get instant access to everything I've ever posted on the site in the last 5 years. And you also get access to twice weekly live Zoom guitar hangouts where we come together one weekday night, one weekend afternoon, depending on what time zone you're in, and we just play guitar for an hour and a half, explore different songs, different concepts, different lessons. All right, everybody, happy playing, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Before I go, I would like to extend a huge thank you to the following upper tier Pow Music patrons: Jason, Shogun7, Nick P, Billy Paps, Pete Elliott, Sean Westfall, Wes Williams, Eric Pillez, Darren Jones, Dr. Ixlin, Andy, Dennis McNulty, Paul Weatherall, Hal Jones, T. Fletch, Dmitry Unkovsky, Greg, Joe, Wayne Evans, Jeff Lambert, Jorge Vaz, Jack Williams, Joe Prengle, LW, Dave Hubner, Fred Locke, Ruben Garcia, Kay Carter, Steve C., Jens Fischer, Joseph Alpert, Mu Jang, Darren, Jonas, Jesse Jacobs, David McPherson, Michael L., Brent Owens, Andrew Gunthart, Jay Brilliant, Jake Martin, William Creighton, Donald James Grass, Chris Freeman, Stephen Pisano, Trampus Thompson, Kent Gresham, John Cushman, Baba Shetty, Derek Mickle, Sean Ellis, Jeff Weatherwax, Boomer Dell, and Joe Fleck. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of the Pow Music patrons for helping to make it possible to provide all this free content here on YouTube. Thank you so much. Happy playing. I'll see you next time.